In mid-November, we had you on the podcast, and that specific day, one of your all-time favorite stocks was tanking. And you walked in and you coolly said, I just bought another $1 million today, while I was absolutely panicking because I was losing a lot of money. And then that exact stock plummeted even further. It went down from $100 that day to $70, where you took a levered position in the stock. And everyone was calling you insane like they usually do. And then, of course, like you usually are, you were absolutely right, because now it's at an all-time high of around $150 a share. So you basically doubled your money. Had you guys watched that episode 3 months ago, you would be up 50% on that one stock that we discussed that episode.
They would also be up over 200% on your initial call of Robinhood when it was $38 a share. And you said your one regret was not having more money to invest in more Robinhood.
Yeah, that's all true. I'm fully margined, so there's no more money left to invest at this point.
Well, the reason why we wanted to bring you on is because you were absolutely correct with all of these predictions. And also the market is at a very scary place right now. It does not seem like a confident market. Like every day it's a coin toss up or down, and it's usually by quite a big amount. There doesn't seem to be any consistency in the market either.
It also seems like the fear index is at a very strong fear level, even though we're only like 1% from all-time highs.
So the market hates unknowns. We know that, right? Like more than anything else, the market does not know how to handle unknowns. And there's never been a larger unknown in the history of the market in our lifetime than artificial intelligence. It really doesn't matter how pedigreed you are, how much money you manage. I don't care if you're at the top of the food chain in Silicon Valley and technology. Everybody has differing opinions on how this is going to play out. And that's a scary place to be. So it does make sense that we're having this volatility. However, I think there's an opportunity for investors to get to the ground truth, maybe not in terms of what's going to happen in 10 years, but in terms of what's happening right now, because there's so much noise in the market and so much confusion that people are just panicking. And the reality is there's a fairly good amount of transparency as to what's happening right now with artificial intelligence if you know where to look and you're willing to actually spend the time cutting through the noise and finding that ground truth.
So while everyone is absolutely panicking, you're digging your heels in. And I'm curious, what do you know that others don't about AI?
Yeah, I've never felt more confident about the AI trade than I do today. And most of that is based on what I've seen surface over the last, I would say, 2 weeks. You guys are probably familiar with what's been happening with agentic AI. There's been some really big new products that have surfaced. OpenClaw is probably the biggest one. I'm seeing things today that I didn't think I would see for at least another year. And AI has started to accelerate rapidly in terms of its actual integrated adoption and its use cases and its productive value inside of enterprise and small business and for personal use. So a lot of the question marks that I think existed just a couple months ago are gone now as it relates to AI.
What was the biggest question that you think people had, and what is the answer to that question?
Well, I think the two biggest misunderstandings about AI, one is that we're in this bubble, and everybody likes to relate it to the dot-com bubble, which I was intimately involved with. I was young. I was living in LA, working at a dot-com, and I remember it like it was yesterday. But there's a very big difference between what unraveled in 1999 and 2000 and what's happening today in AI. Back then, Wall Street and the world saw the future of what the internet could be and likely would be. And all the dollars flowed very quickly into enterprise to fund that. However, it didn't evolve quickly enough, right? So it took the internet like 15 years for us to start to see the type of productivity and the type of efficiencies and the type of acceleration that we knew would be possible. The money was invested many years earlier, and it just took too long to play out. So we weren't able to see the productivity increases. We weren't able to see the step-ups in revenue generation from internet companies quickly enough. And that, I think, is a large part of what led to the dot-com boom busting.
Does it worry you, though, right now that the top 10% of households are responsible for 50% of the spending?
No, not at all. I think that's a totally separate issue. I think, the main difference that I'm discussing is AI has the opposite problem of what happened during the dot-com boom, in that the acceleration of enterprise adoption of artificial intelligence is moving too quickly. Now, that presents other issues like potentially, the systematic destruction of humanity, which is a possibility. Like, that's bad if it happens. But because it's moving so quickly, we're starting to see rapid adoption of massive amounts of productivity and efficiency in the business world. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I didn't think it was possible. Okay. So all of the things that led to the dot-com bubble busting are actually happening, but in the opposite way right now.
How could that be shared equally? And how do you ensure that the top 1% don't get 99% of the productivity gains?
I can't, but that will always take care of itself. So the issue that you're surfacing is potentially very real, but I think that has a way of taking care of itself through politics, through regulation, through taxation. There are an infinite number of policies that we can adopt if this plays out in that way. And my assumption is that we will figure it out. Because if we don't figure it out, yes, there will be people wanting to overthrow the government, and nobody wins in that scenario, right? So you just have to assume that we'll figure it out. But I think you're jumping way too far ahead. The big issue that everyone has with AI that's causing the instability we're seeing right now is it a bubble or is it not a bubble? Well, I don't think it's a bubble because we are actually seeing the things that we need to see in terms of productivity and revenue generation to ensure that there's value in the money that's being spent. Now, we're always going to have a degree of creative destructionism, right? In the dot-com bubble, it was pets.com. We're going to have lots of pets.coms of the artificial intelligence revolution, right? There will be a lot of creative destructionism, a lot of wrappers that will go bust, a ton of overspending on the wrong companies. That's natural. That's to be expected. But I don't think we will see the type of massive bubble burst just based on this not being real enough, quick enough. But the other big issue, and I think this is very real and very important, and I think this is part of the reason why we might ultimately have an issue with a very small concentration of companies and people getting the bulk of value out of this, is because so many people misunderstand what AI actually is. They just think it's an autocomplete because, quite honestly, a couple of years ago, it kind of was an autocomplete, right? That's not what it is today. So if you were to give today's LLM or any of the agentic agents, any of the agentic AIs that are out there right now, a nuanced problem, a problem that it has never seen before, okay? A problem that it can't just go dig up an answer and serve it to you like Google would. It's able to actually extract a solution to the problem without simply just pulling it from a data set today. And if you want to understand how it's doing that, all you have to do is ask it, right? Say, that's incredible. How did you actually solve that problem for me? And it will show you how the problem's solved, okay? And we get really confused because we think this is not really intelligence, because it works a little bit different than the way our minds work. In fact, we don't fully understand the way our minds work. And we still today don't fully grasp 100% of how some of the AI is working today. But this is critically important because, a plane doesn't flap its wings like a bird. We used to think to fly, to gain altitude, you'd have to flap wings, right? A plane doesn't do that. But does a plane fly? Yes, of course it does. All compute, all technology is based on zeros and ones, very simple things, right? So when you have these very simple things and you apply massive amounts of scale to simplicity, you get complexity, right? That is able to do things that you never thought would be imaginable with what you started off with, zeros and ones. Same thing with human biology and living life with, everything's an atom, right? Very simple, but the complexity, once you bring massive amounts of scale to that very simple thing, gives us all of life. Do we fully comprehend how we get from here to here? No, but it happens. And so a lot of the pattern recognition that artificial intelligence is based on seems like it's fake to us, but it's very real and very important. And we can't quite comprehend just how powerful that pattern recognition is going to be in a few years. So I think once you understand those two things, you become a bit more relieved of the realness of this.